Welcome back and thank you for joining me. This week's piece is so mind-blowing that I have to just give you the spark notes or the cheat sheet right now and just tell you where we're going, just so in case you don't make it to the end, we got the message. Basically, what we're going to learn and prove from the scriptures is that the plague of darkness that happened in Egypt, in one of the 10 plagues, was not actually darkness like we think dark when the lights are off. We're actually taught it was an amount of abundant light that descended upon the earth at that time in Egypt, and the light was unique in that it wasn't a physical light, it was a spiritual light. And the scriptures teach us that the eyes of the Egyptians' mind could not handle this light. So first of all, we have to understand we're dealing with a plague of an abundant light, not darkness. It just happens to be that that light caused darkness. For example, if someone's hungover in their bed on a Sunday morning and someone opens the shades right away and the light shines in their face, you can't see. You're going to cover your eyes. You close your eyes, it turns black. Why? Too much light. So there is such a reality of too much light being blinding. Like if I shine a high-powered flashlight in your eyes, you can't see from abundant light. So the plague of Egypt of darkness was really abundant light. This light was an ancient light that Adam was using in the Garden of Eden to see from one end of the world to the next. Actually, we teach that the Garden of Eden is two separate locations. Garden is a geographic region, and Eden is a specific place within the brain where pleasure emanates from. This is based off the Kedushat Levi, a great rabbi. So we see that we do have actually an eye in our brain called the pineal gland. And this eye secretes melatonin when we sleep at night. Every human has this eye, so look for yourself if you don't believe me. And it also is believed to be the source of a dimethyltryptamine secretion to take you to your dream state when you dream at night, which that stands for DMT, otherwise known as the most psychoactive chemical to humanity, the businessman's trip. It's referred to. It supposedly lasts 10 to 15 minutes in the psychedelic space when consumed. Happens to be this psychedelic chemical found in plants in the world we naturally produce from an eye in our mind. So when we said that the Egyptians' eye in their mind could not handle this amount of light, and the Israelites could, and it was a plague of light, and it was the same light that Adam had in his brain in a location called Eden that resurfaced in Egypt, was hidden again away, and will resurface again in the future, we believe there could be a connection here. And if anyone knows anything about me, I've been speaking about this for years, and I have an online course and a manuscript. You're welcome to learn more about that topic. All ancient cultures and religions around the world focused on this one part of the brain, and specifically this chemical, including the Egyptians, the Israelites, and the Mayans. If anyone asks, where do we see the Israelites involved with this chemical? I would say that we brought to Egypt with us specific trees that we planted, and Rashi says we stared at. And while staring at them, we had faith there'd be a redemption, and we took these trees out with us into the desert with Moses. Happens to be, acacia is one of the number one containing plants in the world of DMT, of dimethyltryptamine, the super psychedelic chemical. So what were the Israelites doing taking the most psychoactive plant in the world with them into Egypt? Let's dive in right now and find out. Okay, Exodus 10:21. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Hold out your hand towards the sky, that there may be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched, a heavy darkness." Let's start off by looking at a teaching for the Medrash. The Medrash says, where did this darkness come from? And Rabbi Yehuda says, it descended from the darkness of the upper regions. Darkness of the upper regions. The Medrash continues with Rabbi Yehuda's source for this and says, "He made darkness his screen, dark thunderheads, dense clouds of the sky, were his pavilion round about him." This is from Psalms. So in Psalms, we see King David referring to a darkness that dwells upon high, where God dwells. We need to understand this concept of a darkness from the upper regions. What exactly is this darkness? Let's first start off by looking at a teaching from the Holy Or Chaim. He says, why specifically with this plague, the plague of darkness, did Moses stretch out his hand? Wasn't it the case with all the other plagues that Hashem still tells Moses to stretch out his hand, yet in each of those plagues, Moses uses his staff, as we see it's written in Exodus 9:23. So Moses held out his rod towards the sky. And we see with all the other plagues, Moses is using his staff, but this one he's using his hand. That's another one of our questions. So what's the difference here in the plague of darkness that Moses uses his hand to activate the plague, as it's written, Moses stretched out his hand? That's our question. Now we're going to dive into another question. And in regards to the verse that says, "But all the children of Israel, there was light in their homes," as we'll see below. This is when the plague of darkness came. It said all the children of Israel had light in their homes. The Chizkuni asks, Why is the location of the plague not affecting the Israelites not mentioned here like it is in all the other plagues? As in all the other plagues, the Torah says in the land of Goshen, meaning this is where the plague was in Egypt, but it wasn't in the land of Goshen where the Israelites were. So every time the plague didn't affect the Israelites, it was geographically related to not being in Goshen. But now it's not in, it wasn't saying where the darkness wasn't, it was saying they had light in their homes. What's going on? Rather, it specifies that the location the Israelites weren't affected was specifically in their house. The intention of the question here is, why is the home of the Israelites mentioned as where the plague wasn't, when all the other plagues used the city of the Israelites to mention the location of the lack of the plague? And we see in Exodus 10:23 over here, it says, the Israelites enjoyed light in their dwellings. And we will answer with the help of the blessed Hashem that here, in truth, it was completely within the ability, the hand of the Holy One, blessed be He, to extend Pharaoh's heart to simply and immediately send the children out of his land. Like God couldn't get Pharaoh to send us out right away, as we know that the hearts of kings and officers are in the hands of Hashem. Rather, the purpose of the exile and the redemption of Israel in Egypt was that all the inhabitants of the world would become aware that there was a ruler over the palace, a lord over the world. As we know, because it's written in Exodus 9:16, nevertheless, I have spared you for this purpose, in order that you show my power, and that in order my fame may resound throughout the world. I know some people see this verse and they're like, oh, your God has an ego. He wants everyone to know what he's about. He wants to blow up and go viral and everyone know who he is. It's not for his sake. It's for our sake. If I had like unlimited water source and I was like, tell the whole world that I have water so they can get water from me, they'd be like, Harry, you have such an ego. I'd be like, no, I just have a lot of extra water. I'm just trying to be a nice guy. I could probably just enjoy myself with all this water, but I want the whole world to know I have this water. So please spread the word about my water. So you could see someone could want themselves to go viral and not for the sake of the ego, just to share their water. Nothing too crazy about that. And every single plague had its own purpose of what it achieved. And the plague of darkness was to make known the divine providence of the blessed Hashem in the lower realms in earth, that he did, does, and will do in regard to all realities. And behold, it's written in the book of Kohelet, written by King Solomon, a wise man has eyes in his head, whereas a fool walks in darkness. We have a wonder to ask about this verse. Do fools not have eyes on their faces like other humans who happen to be wise would have eyes? Like, just because you're not smart means you don't have eyes? It's not possible that all fools can't physically see and walk in darkness. Like, it's not possible. And furthermore, another question. When the verse says that a wise man has eyes in his head, the verse should have said that a wise man walks in light and the fool walks in darkness, to be congruent. If you're going to say the fool walks in darkness, tell me the wise man walks in light. But the wise man having eyes in his head is not the opposite of a fool walking in darkness. So just be congruent with your verses about what's going on here. It's possible to explain by introducing the following teaching from the Talmud. It says in Avodah Zarah 3a, the Gentiles say before him, before the Master of the universe, give us the Torah afresh and we'll perform its mitzvot, like we want in now. The Holy One, blessed be He, says, silly fools, do you think you could just request this? One who works before Shabbat will eat on Shabbat. One who did not take pain or did not hustle before Shabbat doesn't have food on Shabbat, meaning you had to have prepared or you have to do something to earn something. You can't just get food on Shabbat without having to earn it. So you can't just get the Torah, you have to do stuff. The opportunity of performing mitzvot has already passed, and now it's too late to ask to perform them, basically. But even so, God says to them, I have an easy mitzvah for you to fulfill, an easy commandment, and it's called sukkah. Go and perform a sukkah. Let's see if you could do that. Guys, sukkah is so easy. You just sit inside of a booth and drink wine and eat good food, and you're getting a mitzvah. It's an easy mitzvah. The teaching continues. So the nations of the world immediately go out and prepare and build a sukkah on their roofs. And then the Holy One, blessed be He, shines down upon them the heat of the sun from the month of Tammuz, which is not normally in Sukkot. Special heat starts to blast. And then everyone quickly gets up and leaves their sukkah due to the heat. And they're like, I'm out. I can't do this mitzvah. It's hot in the sukkah. I'm not drinking wine in this heat. And later on, the Talmud teaches, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, there is no hell in the world to come. There's no such thing as hell. What? Rather, the Holy One, blessed be He, will remove the sun from its sheath, where it's situated during these times, and heats that world with it. The wicked will be punished by that and consumed by the heat, but the righteous will be healed by it. What is going on here? There's no hell, there's just the heat that comes from the sun that punishes certain people and heals other people. Let's keep going. The source in the Tanakh from this teaching is the following verse. It says in Malachi, "But for you who revere my name, a sun of victory shall rise to bring healing." So we see there was embedded in this reality called sun the power to heal. As well, let's look into the following teaching from the Talmud. I know we're doing a lot of weaving here, but we're painting a masterpiece. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, "A precious stone hung around the neck of Abraham, our forefather, and any sick person who looked at it would be immediately healed. When Abraham, our forefather, died, the Holy One, blessed be He, hung this stone from the sphere of the sun." Some mind-blowing teachings over here, guys. This is crazy. "And behold, it is known that whoever has eye pains or weak eyes in general, that person can't tolerate strong light. Rather, the opposite. The light will even darken his ability to see. Even a person that has healthy and functioning eyes still cannot stare at such a strong light, specifically the light of the sun. The reason for this is that the power of our eyes are capped and limited. And behold, when humanity discusses things of the intellect and gaining clarity, verbiage of light is always used, like a light bulb went off in my head. When you have clarity, you associate it with light. And in matters of things that don't make sense to people or where there's a lack of clarity, verbiage of dark is always used. Oh, my mind's so cloudy, it's foggy in there, I can't see. Just like a dark room, one cannot see anything, so too, something that the mind cannot comprehend, that thing will be hidden from them and not be able to be seen. And this is the exact intention of the following verse. He reveals deep and hidden things, knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him, from the book of Daniel. You see, all these spiritual teachings that we're bringing down, we always have to have a source in the Torah and the Tanakh. For where do we have this from? Where is the legend from the Israelites pulling these teachings from? Since nothing is hidden from Hashem, and there's always light with Him. So this verse teaches us that nothing is hidden from God, and because nothing is hidden, there's light. So light is associated with clarity, and then godliness. If we look into the holy writings of Israel, we could see the main difference between the nations of the world and the children of Israel. Regarding Israel, the Israelites believe something that they cannot see or grasp, and because of that, they are able to understand and perceive metaphysical realities, things beyond the laws of nature that we think about and perceive and contemplate, which matters of that category cannot be grasped by our rational mind. This, however, is not the case with the nations of the world, in which case they only believe in what their eye can see, and they don't believe that the Holy One, blessed be He, created it and oversees all that was created, and that He alone does, did, and will act upon all of creation, and that He oversees the world personally. And for the nations, it's difficult for them to understand something well beyond what the rational mind can comprehend. You see, a lot of the nations around the world, they have to make a God, physical God image that they can look at to bow down to, because they need to see their God, because it's too hard to believe in something that can't be seen. And behold, in the future to come, a great light, the hidden light that was saved for the righteous, will be released and revealed, as it's taught in Chagiga. The light of the Holy One, blessed be He, created on the first day, that was not of the sun, but a different kind of light, through which man could observe from one end of the world to the other. But when the Holy One, blessed be He, looked upon the generation of the flood and the generation of the dispersion, and saw that their ways were corrupt, and that they might misuse this light for evil, He arose and concealed it from them, as it's written, and from the wicked their light is withheld. And from whom He did conceal it? For the righteous people of the future, which is, I hope, all of us. I hope we're worthy for this light. As we already learned above, that this light will be a great punishment to the wicked, and that the righteous will be healed by it, as the righteous at that time will be able to understand matters with the eyes of their mind that was not understandable until that point of time. So righteous people will be able to digest this light when it comes. And regarding what we learned above about the time when the Holy One, blessed be He, shines the sun on the nations during their Sukkot, when they all have to bounce their sukkah because it's too hot, because of peak heat in Tammuz, the explanation here is that this peak sun is a reference to the great light of the future that is destined to shine down on the world. And when that happens, the nations of the world won't be able to deal with such a light, since they cannot comprehend what is above what is rational and material. And then everyone will leave their sukkah, which means that people will start to deny the blessed Hashem and throw off the burden of His kingship, since they don't believe in anything that they cannot grasp and comprehend with their logic and understanding. So as this light starts to come down, you'll start to see certain groups of people denying God because they just can't comprehend something beyond them, an intelligent creator to this whole universe. And this is also the explanation from what we said above regarding when Hashem removed the sun from its sheath and the wicked get punished by it and the righteous healed by it. As we have a verse from Malachi, that we know that happens. But for you who revere my name, a son of victory shall rise to bring healing. So we already know there's going to be healing from the sun. And this is the intention of the question we had from what we learned above from King Solomon, that the wise man has eyes in his head, and not that the wise man walks in light, which was the opposite verbiage of how we describe the fool who walks in darkness. Based on what we said above, that regarding someone who walks in light, a regular person could even be blinded by a strong physical light. That's possible. So it's not talking about physical light in that verse in King Solomon. He's not talking about darkness of physical darkness. This is why the verse says the wise man has eyes in his head. This is the eye of the mind. I didn't write this. This is written by rabbis hundreds of years ago. The eye of the mind. Can you get a closer reference to the pineal gland, the literal eyeball that we have in the middle of our brain? In this eye, you could stare at a great light without being affected. Since he is a wise man, talking about this human, he is worthy to see with the eyes of his mind, even matters that are metaphysical, above the laws of nature. You could tune into different frequencies of light because you're not just believing in things that you see. And we know there's light on the spectrum that we can't see, infrared and ultraviolet. It's on the spectrum of light and we can't see it. So that should be enough proof for someone to believe in a light that's beyond their comprehension. And when it says that a fool walks in darkness, that his eyes of his mind get darkened from a great light. And this settles our question that even a fool, which we can translate as someone full of sin, as we see from the sages, a man commits transgression only if a spirit of foolishness, of folly, enters him. So we define a fool as someone now who's got a lot of sin under their belt. The fool mentioned above has eyes inside of his head, just as the same as the wise man that has eyes inside of his head, these eyeballs that we're talking about inside of the mind. However, he cannot use them to see and understand matters above the logic of the mind. And this is what the verse says over here. And Hashem told Moshe, stretch out your hand over the heavens. Hand over here, when it says hand, is a hint to the divine providence that was made known to the Egyptians, that the Holy One, blessed be He, oversees reality with personal oversight onto the whole of creation with His hand. And since wicked humans cannot fathom this, since they cannot believe in anything that their eyes cannot visualize and understand, so for them, things become dark if they can't comprehend something spiritual. And this was the purpose of the plague of darkness. Now with this, we can explain the medrash from above regarding where the darkness came from. When it says the darkness came from the upper regions, the upper darkness. As it says in Psalms, He made darkness His screen, dark thunderheads, dense clouds of sky were His pavilion around Him. We have a proof that there was an upper darkness. And now we're explaining what that upper darkness is. The explanation here is that the darkness that prevented the Egyptians from seeing was not a physical darkness at all. Rather, it was a spiritual light that caused the darkness, since the Egyptians cannot comprehend the power of Hashem, who is above the laws of nature. Therefore, Hashem specifically tells Moses to stretch his hand specifically, and not his staff, to hint to the hand of Hashem, which is divine providence from above that guides the whole world. And this is also the explanation of the verse, that for all the children of Israel there was light in their homes, and it did not mention the land of Goshen, rather in their homes, as we asked before. This means to say that literally in the places where the Egyptians were standing, right next to the Israelites, there was a difference in that the Egyptians couldn't see anything, and the Israelites were experiencing an incredible light, a state of bliss, somewhat of a state of ecstasy. And the Egyptians were just bugging out and couldn't see. And based on what we said before, that since Israel believes in things that they cannot see, they are able to perceive things above the understanding of the rational mind, which is not the case regarding the nations of the world. I once heard a lecturer say, someone asked him, what was the psychedelic, or what is the psychedelic experience of DMT like when my third eye opens in my awake state? And his response was, what would you explain to a blind person if a blind person asked you what the color red was? Would you be able to detail it or describe it? And there is no human on this planet who has an answer of what they would tell a blind person so that blind person could understand the color red. Just a simple thing, a frequency of lights that creates the color red, but you cannot describe what it is. So the speaker said, so too I cannot describe this experience to you. You don't have the capability or the facility to digest that light or that experience. So we see there was a moment of time where a great light came, and those who had peace of mind and believed in something greater were able to dwell with that light and be one with it. And the people who believed in the physical world as their God, and they were very materialistic and ego-driven, that light drove them insane. And I would suggest the same thing happened if you gave a righteous person unexpectedly hit him with a psychedelic experience endogenously that he didn't foresee coming. perhaps you'd be able to navigate that space a lot better than someone who's ego-driven and has to deal with seeing themselves, because we know in that space, supposedly, there's a lot of self-reflection. This is just some free thoughts that I'm throwing out there, but either way, thank you for joining me for this game-changing idea that the plague of darkness was just abundant light. Shabbat Shalom.